for quite a big markup. Now, moving on, we had, of course, mentioned that we were going to have a conversation around, well, the East Africa community, an update on that integration, and, of course, where the discussion around the continued implementation of a single currency has been. Well, on the second part of that discussion today, my colleague Abe Agina continued his conversation with John Rwangombwa, who is the head of the Bank of Rwanda, just to bring us up to speed on this discussion. Take a look for yourself.
Welcome and thank you for keeping it KT News. You now want to speak to Rwanda's central bank governor, and that is John Rwangombwa, who will be taking us through some of the milestones that have been achieved in the integration process. And really, what does he think about the track that we are taking in regard to economic integration? Thank you very much. My first question really is about, do you feel there is sufficient international support towards this process, which is a major departure from what the economies continue to enjoy?
Yeah, I think you've seen that practically, that we are committed to play our part in deepening regional integration, and we've been really among those that take the first step in implementing whatever we've agreed on as a region. And as you rightly said, issues to do with the identity cards was to allow free movement of people across our borders. And as you well know, Rwanda was among the first countries to open our borders to citizens of EAC, but to the other two countries that had committed to allow movement using identity cards. And there are many other areas that we've really taken a lead in opening our borders, easy entry to our country, opening our skies to easy movement of air flight within the region. So there are different ways that we've taken the lead in really deepening this regional integration, and we are committed from the top down to all players within our country to really achieve this regional integration.
And my final question really is, what's your outlook for the region in the event that the regional integration process is adequately implemented?
I think the outlook is very positive. Very positive in two ways. One, regional integration itself has advantages on economic development in general. And I think economists has put it, I think, about 2%. With full integration, we are bound to benefit additional 2% growth of our economies. So that's very important to achieve as we deepen our regional integration. But number two, even before full integration, today East Africa is among the leading performers within Africa in general, as the economies of East Africa. When you look at Africa this year, as a continent, it's projected to grow by 1.6%. But there are few countries that are expected to grow above 6% this year. And three of those, in fact, four of those are in Africa, in Eastern Africa. So we have Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, and Ethiopia, of course. Though it's not a member of East Africa, but it's a close ally of East African bloc and part of the East African bloc in general. So we already have economies that are doing well, and building on the achievements we have already, adding on the benefits or the economies of scale brought into by deepening regional integration, that gives us a strong outlook in terms of the performance of our economies and the development of our people in general. So the more we allow free movement of people, the more we allow free movement of labor, all these will add to general performance of the economy, but also improvement of the lives of our population.
Thank you for making time to speak to us.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Now, of course, two things stand out in that interview. First, of course, the continued move towards the integration and the optimism in that direction. And secondly, the move towards improving the lives of the people of the East Africa region. Well, to bring us up to date on what exactly the efforts have been today, Abi Agina, my colleague, is standing by with an update on just that. Abi, what exactly has been the conversation today towards, well, letting people know where this conversation needs to go today?
Well, many thanks, Akaba. Today, the focus really has been around pushing towards having the political confederation. We did have representatives from the Ministry of East Africa Community making several discussions around political confederation. Mm-hmm. We did talk about the strides being made so far. Of course, this is the highest level of the East Africa integration process, which, of course, as you know, starts off from the customs union, going to the common market, and finally monetary union, and overall is the political confederation. So really, the talks today have been around the next step of action, where we are seeing a draft model of a political confederation has already been drafted. The heads of state will be discussing this in January as they meet to chart the way forward around the regional integration process. So that was really the main focus for today, as well as an update on the monetary union, where we had the ministry officials also just walking us through around some of the major milestones they have achieved. Of course, there's still a lot to be done, and a lot is still running behind schedule, including the setting up of the East Africa Bureau of Statistics, as well as the setting up of the East Africa Monetary Office that will be guiding this delicate process, Wakaba.
Well, Abi, of course, hastening to remind our viewers that you are at an event which is meant to bring, various stakeholders, including officials in government, people in the media and other stakeholders up to speed on just where exactly implementation of the East Africa Community is. What has been the reception there amongst these stakeholders? Are people really familiar with what we call the roadmap of the East Africa Community?
Well, it is emerging that a sizable chunk of the population across the community are quite well-versed with the East Africa community. But the crux of the matter, Wakaba, is a lot still needs to be done when it comes to people owning this process. And it all boils down to the grassroots, whether there'll be will among the people when it comes to implementation of the common market. And the general feeling among most of the delegates taking part in this conference is the fact that the East Africa community still has to up its game when it comes to dissemination of information that will be critical for enabling people to understand what this process is all about. There are some references that were being made how the East Africa community is going to borrow heavily from the European Union, as well as other developed blocks across the African continent, that being ECOWAS, COMESA, and these were some of the areas that were up for referencing, where people were able to throw examples, but it still remains unclear to many on what will be the major gains out of having a common market for the region.